now to introduce our presenter for tonight's lecture. Marissa Jacobs is the founder of The Art of Ecology, a business dedicated to combining creativity with environmental science in order to connect the public to the ecosystems they are a part of. She has been foraging ever since she was a small child growing up in the Pocono Mountains, and has since turned that passion into something she shares with others. Marissa is a trained herbalist through the Herbal Academy, has a degree in wildlife conservation and management, and a master's in environmental education, as well as being a National Geographic certified educator. Her love of ecology, plant medicine, and habitat preservation has led her to facilitate numerous foraging workshops, both in person and virtually, for the past 10 years. And she has even created her own foraging field guide and drink recipe book titled Trails to Tasting. So at this point, I will turn things over to Marissa to get us started. Hi, Marissa.
Hi, thank you so much for having me this evening.
Thanks for being with us.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. Okay, can everyone see?
Yes, it
Or
looks
at
great.
least, can you see, Amy?
I can, yes. I'll let you know
All
about
right.
your slide advancing if there's any issues, but it looks great.
Okay, great. So again, my name is Marissa with The Art of Ecology, and we are going to be delving into the wonderful world of foraging. Spring is a really great time to get out there, to get foraging, to investigate the new plant growth that we're all very excited about. So I did just want to introduce myself a little bit further. Amy did say a lot, but if you are interested at the end, you want more foraging goodness, I would love to see you in person. I will be at an upcoming Earth Day festival, and then in June I will actually be in person at Jenkins Arboretum as well. So I would love to meet some of you face to face. Tonight, as we're talking, we're going to really look at why take the time to forage. What even is the point when we can go grocery shopping? We'll talk a little bit about ethical and sustainable harvesting, the difference between harvesting techniques and methods for invasive versus native plants. And then at the end, we'll dive in a little bit to preparation and recipe ideas to kind of get you started, get you inspired. Overall, there's 1,000,001 reasons to forage. So the world is your oyster. But this is my top 3 list of why foraging is so great. Number 1 is we're getting food that is nutritious. It is whole foods that are straight from the source. We're looking at all sorts of great things. We're looking at enhancing our ecosystem connection, and I am seeing now that my slide did not save, so we're gonna just skip the bottom dark color. That was from a different presentation, but the main title text is still okay. We're enhancing our ecosystem connection, getting outside, learning what is in our areas. And we're also protecting habitats through invasive species management, which is a really fun and creative way to kind of get rid of the invasive plants that might be in our area. So looking at the health benefits, getting those whole nutritious foods, there's so many great things. And throughout the presentation, I have little underlined and asterisk bits of text that then are in order, some scholarly articles that I have found for some of this stuff. So if anybody is interested into really diving deeper, I would be more than happy to share these articles, but at least you have the titles and the authors there if you want to do further research on your own as well. But the first is we're getting outside, we're getting moving, And there's so many great things that come from that. It improves our mental health, and being outside in green spaces is proven to reduce anxiety, depression symptoms. So it's boosting our mood, it improves creative thinking, and that can often lead to an increased level of productivity. It improves sleep as well, because when we're outside, we're being exposed to natural light, and that improves our circadian rhythm, which kind of ties into physical health, because if we are feeling well mentally, we can motivate ourselves to feel well physically as well. The reduced cortisol, which is that stress hormone, is going to be way reduced in our bodies. It improves our cardiovascular health. And this is kind of like we're getting moving, we're getting exercise. Being in sunlight improves our vitamin D levels. And there's something fun called a phytoncide, and that is a plant chemical that is produced by trees, by plants, trees in excess. That is what plants will use to kind of communicate to one another and boost their immune systems as they're talking to each other about, hey, there's an invading insect in this area. Everybody be careful. And so as we're walking through these chemicals that the plants are producing, we're kind of we're breathing it in, we're getting bombarded by these signals, and that can improve our own immune system and well-being as well. So I think that's always fascinating and really incredible. Then we have the health benefits of ingesting the food, of whether it's eating seasonally, locally, and how important that is, or whether it's the fact that we're actually eating food that has had to fight for its life. I kind of like to compare commercially raised food and produce to couch potatoes. These are plants that farmers are having to work really hard to provide food for millions and millions and millions of people. So, to run the risk of drought or insect invasion ruining crops is not okay. So, we have a lot of chemicals that are applied to make the plants growing time very easy. They have regular irrigation, whereas wild plants don't. They have rain when it comes, and Pennsylvania's in drought a lot. They have insect exposure, insect chew all the time, which is a perfectly normal and even wanted part of the ecosystem. However, plants are trying to say, hey, 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 you're eating too fast, slow down. We're going to produce extra chemicals to taste really bad so that you don't eat so fast or so much, so that now the plant can grow big and strong in time for the pollinators to come or the herbivores to come through and disperse seeds. But those chemicals that are produced when the plants are fighting for their life are actually plants that, or nutrients that, as we eat them, we're ingesting and gaining those benefits as well. So it's kind of, we're taking on the power of what we're eating, when really, if we're looking at, think of like a farmed strawberry that we buy from Giant or wherever we get our produce, that strawberry hasn't really had to fight. It's had things easy. So it hasn't needed to produce a lot of these secondary metabolites or chemicals. Whereas these fighters, these wild plants, have had to work really hard, and that can benefit us as well. And as we eat these plants throughout the year, the seasons change, new plants will grow. That benefits our bodies. The plants, for the most part, want to be eaten. They want herbivores to come and ingest them, because that's often how seed dispersal is done or pollination is done. So it's good to be eaten. So wildlife and organisms have evolved and adapted alongside these plants, and the benefits that these plants have on our bodies changes as the seasons change. So for example, in the spring, a lot of these plants are really, really great at stimulating the digestive and immune systems. something that in many animals has been dormant for the past winter. So it needs to be reawakened. And then as we get into summer, it's now maintaining internal homeostasis. So plants are going to be really great at cooling off our bodies and maintaining a regular internal temperature. Then as we get into the fall, our many mammals and other animals are starting to get ready for hibernation or for a more dormant period of time. They're trying to bulk. It's bulking season. They're putting on weight. And these plants are going to be high in starch. They're going to be jam-packed with calorie-dense nutrients that will keep them hopefully happy and healthy throughout the winter season. Aside from the health benefits, there's that ecosystem connection that we get as well. So as we're going outside, if we're identifying using a field guide rather than something app or AI based, we're actually making these neural pathway connections in our brains. We're getting more and more accustomed to making detailed observations. And once we start observing something, it's really hard to stop. We can go on a walk and now suddenly we're seeing so many different things and learning more and more. And chances are, if you're using a field guide, something that's going to say, okay, now take a look at this leaf. Is it shaped this way or this way? Are they arranged along the stem oppositely or alternately or whorled? We're starting to build these connections and understand more and more about them. Whereas if we're using, now I love iNaturalist, I can rant and rave about the wonders of it. However, if we're relying on that to identify our plants, we're not the ones building the connection, the phone is. And the phone can get it wrong too. And when we're foraging, we do not want to get our plants wrong. We want to have our identification down to a pat. It's also getting us outside. We're exploring our communities. We're learning more and more about the animals and the plants that live around us, how they change seasonally, and it can increase our sense of place and our sense of connection to the land. And finally, we can also be understanding how wildlife is connected to all of this. We're looking at how do the bees need the individual flowers. We can watch and say, oh, wow, the honeybees are coming and they are only going after this plant today. Or, this colony is going after a different plant. Or, wow, I'm now seeing this cool forest specialist pollinator that's hanging out in the woods. We're learning more about the deer and the pathways that they take as we are hiking in the woods and we see deer trails that are being made. And as we consider all of these animals, we can think about the food chain overall and understand how we have an impact on wildlife, how the plants have an impact on wildlife, and how everything is connected. So now we're going to get into the basics of sustainable and ethical harvesting. I could make this an entire presentation, so please understand that this is the basics. This is just the very brief portion of it, but kind of the rule of thumb. So it's a great jumping off point. I like to say one for me, one for seeds, and one for the bees. It's a little easy kind of mnemonic device to help people remember kind of how much to take. When we think of one for me, we think of taking only what we're going to be able to use within a single year. And that kind of sounds like a lot of, wow, I'm harvesting for a whole year. But it's over the course of the season. As you are picking flowers, plants, fungi, whatever you're harvesting, you don't want to overconsume. And for the most part, even if you dry or preserve things, they're not really going to last for very much longer. And even if they are edible, some of the nutritional value is definitely going to decline after a year's time. So do not overconsume. And if you do find that, oh shoot, I picked too much, I didn't use all of it fresh that I was thinking I was going to, You can always dry or ferment or freeze, which will help extend the time that you'll have things. But overall, we really want to avoid overconsumption while acknowledging that we're part of the ecosystem that we live in too. And utilizing the natural food around us is a wonderful thing. Then we think of one for seeds. We want our plants to thrive. And if they're a native plant, we really, really, really want them to spread and disperse their seeds, because if we allow a plant to grow undisturbed and say, I see in this area there's 3 of these cool flowers. In this picture, it's swamp rose mallow seed heads, and the seeds are a really great grain or starch that we can harvest in like October, November, when it gets cool enough and the seed pods break open. But let's say that I only see one stand of these seed pods and there's only a total of 3 or 4 seed pods. I don't want to take all of them. I want the seeds to be dispersed so that I can come back next year and the year after, which leads into leaving some for the bees or for wildlife in general. We have access, hopefully, many of us have access to grocery stores, to farmers markets, to community gardens, to our own gardens, backyard gardens. So keep in mind that we have alternative food sources while wild animals do not. Many of these animals rely on these plants, some of the ones that we'll be talking about specifically, for shelter, nesting sites, food resources. And here in Pennsylvania, we have numerous forest specialists that are so specific in what they rely on that 90% of their food source might be a very specific tree. And if we are to overharvest, overconsume, prevent seeds from being dispersed, they're not going to have that food in the future. Then we have the basics of safe harvesting. Just because we know we used our field guides and we identified the plant as being edible doesn't mean that it is safe to consume, because of things like roadways, waterways, and lawns or dog walking area. Cars leak a lot of stuff. We've got windshield wiper fluid, oil, we've got just standard emissions and just litter, debris. All of plants, they're going to suck up and sequester pollution. It's an amazing, amazing thing that plants are able to do. But that means that if we're eating these plants that have sequestered pollution, we're now eating the pollution. And that is definitely not the point of having nutritious food that we can find in our backyards. So keep in mind, rule of thumb is 50 feet away from roadways. The busier, the farther away you go. And as you get to like a nice little country road like this one in the picture here, there's not even a yellow line. This is like a chip and tar road. This was right outside the house where I grew up. Maybe we saw one car a week other than ours go down this road. So it's definitely the sort of thing where I felt very comfortable going off maybe 3 feet, 2 to 3 feet from the side of this road, knowing that it was very, very little traffic here. But something like 202, you want to give yourself that nice 50 feet buffer of being safe. We want to be aware of waterways as well, because stormwater runoff, think of, we have these roadways, these busy areas, and as the rain falls, it's washing all of this pollution down into our waterways. That's really, really dangerous. And it's all going to be magnified because all of the pollution from this entire road is going into a body of water, into a river, a stream that's going to go and collect into a river that's comprised of multiple polluted streams. And here in Pennsylvania, we actually have very few bodies of water that are unpolluted. So really avoid aquatic plant harvesting unless you know what's in the water. For example, you may have a pond in your backyard. You know that you don't spray. You know that you don't use chemical fertilizers or pesticides. You know that you don't allow your dog to pee in the pond and that there's only a natural ecosystem here. Great. The American lotus is a plant that is an aquatic one, and the roots of the lotus are really, really great. I like to chop them into slices and use them kind of as buns for like little sliders. They're really good. They're great in sautés, but it's the sort of thing that you only want to forage for if you know what's in the water. And finally, is to be aware of chemical application. In this image, we see this nice little hiking trail with super lush green lawn on the sides, turning into, unfortunately, this is a bunch of invasive privets, multiflora rose, Japanese stiltgrass. Now, I happen to know that this is heavily mowed and monitored. This isn't a natural park setting. But if you don't know that, you can ask yourself a question and say, how did that grass get so green and so lush and so invasive species free? It might be through pesticide application. If you don't know and you see plants that you want to forage for, instead of just taking a chance, you can call park services or the park management. You can talk to property owners and say, hey, do you spray? What are the spraying or application methods that are utilized? Because for the most part, while they're only staying in the soil and in the plant for a season, there are some pesticides that can last in the soil for 3 or more years. So even if someone just bought a house and they're saying, well, I'm not going to spray, I'm not doing that, that doesn't mean that the previous owner didn't and used some chemicals that could be persistent. So please be aware. With that, we're going to jump into a little bit of the role of native plants in our ecosystem. These are going to be really important ones that, yes, we can forage for, but we really want to be conscientious about how much we take. We do not want to take ever more than 10% of the native plant population in a single area. And even then, we want to be considerate of others who may want to forage as well, and not take more than 10% as a group of foragers. So be conscientious with these plants. On the safe side, don't forage for them or plant some in your own yard. First off, they're highly nutritious for the animals that are going to be eating them. And if many of these plants are not utilized, for example, like violets are the host plant for regal fritillary butterflies in this area. If that regal fritillary butterfly does not get the chance to lay their eggs on the violet leaf, and if there's not enough violets in the area, they lay their eggs on something else, those caterpillars will not be able to hatch and thrive. That's how important host plants can be. These native plants are ones that have co-evolved and adapted alongside the other plants in their area, the wildlife that rely on them, and the general overall climate. Here we have false springs, we have really heavy spring rains, we have severe summer droughts that have just been getting worse and worse. But many of these plants, they're accustomed to it. They understand and they're like, hey, we're good. We know what's going on, even if us as humans are still questioning what is Pennsylvania weather doing. Then we have the fact that many of these plants are nesting habitat, as I mentioned, as host plants for insects, as well as bird populations. And of course, we have the fact that these native plants, as they are adapting to the climate and the ecosystem they're in, they're really important for soil and water conservation. So these are just some examples of these nutritious food sources. And every picture in this presentation are forageable plants that are in Pennsylvania that are, for the most part, easily found. So we have our solidagos, which are our goldenrods, and goldenrods can support over 120 native pollinator species for their adult stage of food sources. So this is a really important plant. However, Many goldenrods grow in huge stands and these big fields of them. So harvesting only 10%, it still gets you with a wonderful amount. Goldenrod tastes a little bit savory, except for sweet goldenrod, which, as the name implies, is kind of sweet. Smells a little bit like a Christmas cookie if you rip the leaf. But otherwise, for the most part, the leaves are a little bit savory. All of the aerial parts are edible, meaning aerial is in like above the surface of the ground in the air. So the flower, the leaves, the stem is a little tough, but I like to dry the goldenrod and then grind it down into a powder and use that as a culinary herb. It's delicious. We also have Monardas or bee balms, which is in the mint family. So we can identify it by its square stem and oppositely arranged leaves. And just like most other things in the mint family, is also edible. But both of these plants really support some great pollinators. Things that are accustomed to the local climate, like our sassafras, black-eyed Susan, and coneflower or echinacea, they're going to be ones that are great in rain gardens or in stone gardens as well. If you have the rocky Pennsylvania soil or clay-like Pennsylvania soil, these are going to be ones that are really well adapted to that. And again, all of these are edible as well. Nesting habitat for wildlife, the black cherry is really great for birds. Willow trees are one of the host plants for not pipevines, the red spotted purples, I believe. Could be wrong. It might be a type of swallowtail, but it's a host plant for butterfly populations. Our native willows, and then we have our goldenrod, which you can see in the foreground. There's like a weird balloon inside of the goldenrod stem, and that is called a gall. And in the back, you see the background, it's a little blurry, but it looks as if there's like a weird, tight, dense cluster of goldenrod leaves that just stop in the very top of the stem, and there's no flower. That's called a bunch gall. Both of these galls are produced by the goldenrod wasp, gall wasp. And this is just how the insect creates a home for its egg. It injects a chemical into the plant, and that stimulates the plant hormones to kind of change how the plant grows. And in that balloon shape, that goldenrod gall wasp lays its egg. And the same in the bunch gall. All of those tight leaves will now protect the egg as it grows. And then as resource conservation, we want to keep in mind that here in Pennsylvania, sediment, primarily from erosion, is the number one water pollutant here. And what sediment does is it kills off a lot of the aquatic macroinvertebrates that rely on their gills in order to breathe. It clogs that up. It prevents healthy oxygenation and nutrient flow within the water body. So if we can prevent erosion, we can be helping our water quality. And all of these plants really will use their roots to hold on to the soil, like the swamp rose mallow. If you think back to the picture of the seed heads, this is the flower that those seeds came from. You think of swamp milkweed and boneset as well. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to be really conscientious and watch our every harvest, because we can also utilize this as a method of invasive species management. And this is when I tell people to go wild, harvest everything, just with the caveat of being aware of how you're harvesting, because we don't want to be accidental seed dispersers. So a great thing to do is to, if you know that you have an invasive species, is find out, should I rip it up by the roots? Not every plant is going to be a good candidate for that method of management, just because they're really, really hardy. And if you whack them back like a multiflora rose, If you don't get all of the root system, it will come back with a vengeance. But things like orange daylilies, onion grass, garlic mustard, they're all examples that you can dig out. And what are you going to do? You can't compost these now because that's going to allow seeds to still spread. Eat them. Enjoy the fact that it's not the plant's fault that they're here. So let's use what these plants have to offer. Daylilies create, if you see the little flower buds here, they make fantastic pickles. So just like you would with a cucumber, you can add vinegar and pickling spices to daylily buds. You can also roast the tubers or use the tubers any way that you would use a potato. So that can be a really fun method of you're digging them out, you're getting rid of them, utilize them. We also want to prevent seed dispersal. For example, in this picture, we have autumn olive, but other plants like multiflora rose hips, wineberries, mulberries. As we reach into the plant to harvest the seeds, whether we bump something or as we are pulling the fruits off of the plant, we pull really hard, it bounces back, sends vibrations through the plant, other seeds drop. Now we've accidentally dispersed more seeds. One way around that is to put a foraging or harvest bucket or basket underneath where you're collecting. So anything that falls might fall directly into your basket. Or if it's in a wider area, like I know that when I pick mulberries, if I pick one off of a branch, any of the other ripe ones are going to drop, even if it's further up the branch. I can put a sheet down underneath the tree. And this is a sheet that now is all stained and purpley and weird color, but that's my foraging sheet. So set something aside, and anything that drops is going to drop on your sheet, and you can just collect that. And now you have even more. And then another way is to pick any flowers pre-pollination. Multiflora rose, which is the flower pictured here, not multiflora rose. Dame's rocket is what's pictured here, but multiflora rose and garlic mustard, they're all also really great flowers that are edible. If we are to eat them before pollinators have a chance to pollinate and then they produce new seeds that then get germinated, that's another way that we can prevent the spread. Now we can dive into preparation and recipes, which is the fun part of the foraging, or the more rewarding part. It's really fun to get outside. I love going for the hike. I love finding all these cool plants, but it's for the end goal of eating the plants. And overall, your imagination is the limit. So get creative, mix and match. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. Don't be afraid to explore. But if you're feeling a little, hesitant of maybe you've never had these plants before, you don't know what they taste like. So are they sweet? Should I use it with a dessert? Is it savory to use with as a culinary herb in a soup? You don't know. Try a little bit. Taste a leaf. See, onion grass, as the name implies, tastes like onion. Garlic mustard tastes like garlic. You can also, if you have your plant, it's identified, do a quick Google search of how are other people using it if you are looking for inspiration and you don't know where to start. But otherwise, explore, create, experiment. One way is to prepare the plants fresh. This is always my favorite way. Not only is it super rewarding, you just went out in the morning, you went on a hike, and now you come back and you get to reap the rewards. It's really fun, but it's also going to be the way that the plants have the most nutrient content. So if you're out on the trail and you're just picking blueberries, picking mulberries, great, pop a few in your mouth. But then when you get home, muddle them up into a drink or sprinkle them onto a salad. There's all sorts of cool ways to use things. Otherwise, you can preserve them. And The next most common way to preserve plants that you foraged is through drying. As I had mentioned before, most things are going to be able to be utilized for their nutritive qualities for up to a year. Past that, even if like you've pickled something or you've canned it and it's going to not mold, it's going to last. Some of the nutrient qualities have been degraded over time, and you're not going to get the most bang for your buck if you let them be for more than a year. Overall, the quicker you use them, the better. But it's the sort of thing of if it can get you a few months of use, fantastic. The way that you want to do this is to dry flat out of the sun, because sunlight and those UV rays can degrade both the flavor and the nutritive qualities. So when I'm saying out of the sun, I don't mean in a dark closet somewhere where the light of day cannot reach. But if you have a sunroom, that's probably not the best place. A greenhouse, not the best place. On your kitchen counter, right in the south facing window, probably not the best place. But in a corner of the room, in a countertop that's out of a window, that would be fine. You want to make sure it's also in a single layer where there's going to be really good airflow. The reason for that is that as things are drying, there's still water in it, and that can lead to mold growth. While that's not always the worst case, I mean, it does mean that your plants have gone bad. It's easy to just throw out. But if by accident you do ingest some of that, it can be really bad. For example, there's a type of mold that grows on red clover that as it's drying, if you dry in like you're picking all the red clover tops and you just have this heaping mound of red clover, this mold that grows, if you don't have any blood issues or blood diseases, it's not really going to impact you very much. However, if you have those blood diseases, blood issues, if you're on a blood thinning medication, this can be really, really impactful, as that specific type of mold thins out the blood even further and can lead to hemorrhaging. So it's the sort of thing, dry it flat, don't dry in a heap, avoid the mold growth. And then we have freezing and canning. These are also great ways to preserve plants over time. Pickling or fermenting can be great, which then you would can those things. So sauces, jams, jellies, those pickles, they're great ideas, but more great ideas for those that have storage space. Because if you're canning something, you're not canning just one little jar, you're canning a dozen jars. And so if you have that pantry space or another refrigerator, fantastic. Or if you're going to give them as gifts, that's always one of my favorite holiday gift giving is I make a huge batch of wild berry jelly during the summer, and then I can give that out as gifts to people. But it still requires a lot of storage. So just keep that in mind, as well as the fact that water soluble vitamins that are going to be in a lot of your fruits are very susceptible to freezer burn. So it's, water soluble, so it freezes really well, but now those vitamins are going to be degraded. And so a lot of the nutritive qualities can decrease in frozen fruits. But it is the sort of thing that they'll still taste really good. And not everybody wants to eat jelly for the high level of antioxidants that are found within the mulberries. That's not what everybody is thinking about. Some people just think that, wow, black cherry and blackberry taste really good together on my toast. That's fun. So I don't want us to get super caught up in not enjoying things just because it could be less good. It's still great, still a wonderful thing to do, wonderful thing to eat, but it is the thing to keep in mind. Now I have a few recipes here that these that I have listed are going to be seasonal ones. So these are plants that you can forage for now. In fact, I just led a foraging program on Tuesday and we made garlic mustard pesto together and it was fantastic over whole wheat crackers. That's how we enjoyed it. And so this is something that you can go outside right now and enjoy. The cool thing is that it utilizes a lot of invasive species. So our garlic mustard and onion grass are highly invasive. Garlic mustard is one that is classified as a noxious weed. It should be removed if you find it and come across it. Dandelions are a naturalized non-native, meaning that they're not from here, but they actually benefit the ecosystem instead of harming it. And we have cleavers as well, which is a little whorled plant. I believe I have a picture of it later on, but they're kind of spiky. Another name for it is catch straw. So it's not spiky like thorny, but spiky like Velcro. But we harvest all of these leaves and you can make a big batch. So with this group, I made 5 cups of this. So we had a total of 9 cups of content. So harvest all of your leaves. You want to wash them very gently because if you're washing them harshly, you can rip them, you can degrade them, you can lose things. Cashews are going to be what makes a nice pesto, or you can, if you have nut allergies, just omit the nuts. Cashews are pine nuts. Omit them, and it still is really great. It's just a little less creamy than if you had included cashews or pine nuts. Parmesan cheese and olive oil. Like I said, we ate this over crackers, and it was really, really great. But my personal favorite way to utilize it is in sauteed vegetables with chicken and pasta. I think it's just to die for. That is my favorite. Like when I'm making a meal just for myself, that's my favorite one to make. And in this picture of these sauteed vegetables and chicken, you also see hairy bittercress is the plant in the top that's sitting on the counter. It has that basal cluster of leaves, then with spikes that have tiny little white flowers at the top. And then at the bottom, you see a plant with itty bitty, very small purple flowers, and that is the purple dead nettle. Both of those plants are also spring plants that you can add as your leafy greens to this mix. But garlic mustard is the best. As its name implies, it tastes like garlic. So, however you would use garlic, this leaf is great for. Then we have what I just call floral fritters. You can have the sweet or the savory. And these are kind of like nice little treats. Think of them as like little donuts or little fashnuts. Or if you're going on the savory side, they're almost like little fried potatoes is kind of the texture that you would get. But if you're wanting a nice little sweet snack, I recommend dandelion tops. And so you see the picture of just the dandelion tops. There's one dandelion in the top of the picture that does still have its stem. But for the most part, it's just the flowering tops, and you can include the sepals and a little bit of the stem below it just because that'll help as you're dipping the flower into batter. It helps act as a nice little handle. Um, but incorporating nutmeg or cinnamon into the batter will be really, really nice. And then my family likes to drizzle honey and then sprinkle a little bit of powdered sugar on the top, and it makes a really nice spring dessert. And then on the other side, if you're into savory, we have the purple dead nettle, which you can see a little bit of those tiny purple flowers on a taller stalk. They're not as flat as the dandelion tops are, but they make a really, really nice texture that's almost like a roasted potato when you have these fritters. So we really like to incorporate oregano or basil in the batter and then dip them in ketchup, and this makes a really great snack or appetizer. This picture of the slush, the made content has this green plant on top. That is the cleavers. So this whorled leaves along a stem with these tiny little spiky hairs that will cling to your loose knit sweaters if you're wearing those while you're foraging. But they're super, super good immune tonic for the spring. So I like to make this slush. It's pretty much just a fruit smoothie that you can use foraged fruits for that you might have in your freezer still. So black and blueberries, raspberries, or wineberries. Wineberries are highly invasive, so I do super recommend using as many of those and preventing birds from eating them or deer from eating them, or turtles. Eastern box turtles do like wineberries. So prevent seed dispersal. Mulberries, same. Don't let the cedar waxwings or the robins have their field day with them. You harvest them first. Then we can have strawberries, pitted cherries, you name it. Again, your imagination is the limit here. And put those with your greens. I know a lot of people, when they make smoothies, they'll put kale in. So think of it like kale or spinach that you might add to a smoothie is adding about half cup of cleavers. Now, because the plant is a little bit spiky, I don't recommend eating this raw, like you pick the plant and you just crunch it right there, just because the texture would be like eating a kiwi skin. It's not inedible, and there are some people who do it. I don't eat the skin of a kiwi. So it's a personal choice, but when you blend it up, you're still getting it fresh, but you don't have any of the texture issues. Now, I do want to leave you with this last quote from John Muir, who's the father of the U.S. National Park System. He said that in every walk in nature, one receives far more than he seeks. And whether that is you getting outside and having a nice hike and hearing right now the dawn chorus when my husband gets up to walk the dog before he goes to work, you hear this beautiful bird song, or you see this gorgeous sunset, and you can just feel revitalized by being out in nature. But I really like to think of it too of when we're making these observations, when we're starting to go outside and forage and get to know the plants that grow in our communities that we can utilize. Truly, every single walk that I take becomes more. Even if I'm just out to walk my dog with my kid, and that's all it's supposed to be, we now suddenly see all sorts of new things, and we're picking all sorts of plants that then we put in our lunch or our dinner, and our relationship, our sense of place increases. So as you go outside, don't be afraid, stop, smell the roses, and maybe even take a little nibble. So now I'd like to open it up for questions. I know the Q&A, I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. And the more questions, the better, because I know that there was a lot of content there, and I would love to elaborate or clarify if anyone needs it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Marissa. That was a lot of wonderful information. There was one person who was asking for clarification in the garlic mustard pesto recipe.
Yeah.
It says, do you mean 1C, which I'm assuming is cup, 1 cup
Yes.
each for the pesto?
Oh, 1 cup each of each type of
We need to go back.
Yeah, okay. So if I don't answer your question, please let me know. But I mean for that recipe, which was, let me go back to the presentation, it was a cup of your greens. a quarter cup of the cashews, a quarter cup of the cheese, and then olive oil as needed to keep the blender running. So it's a quarter cup of whatever mixture of leafy green you want to use. So if you want to use all 1 cup of garlic mustard, great. Or if you want to mix and match, that's great too, but it totals 1 cup.
Perfect. Thank you for that
Yeah.
clarification. And keeping on the garlic mustard train here, can you use not only the leaves, but the flowers too when you're making that?
Yes, yes, yes. The flowers are really, really potent. So if you think of, at least in my garden, I really like bitter greens. So I like to grow arugula in my garden, and some of them I will actually let bolt because the flowers I think are really, really potent. Garlic mustard is kind of the same way, where as you're harvesting it, I recommend shredding the leaves and the flowers off and using those. Flowers are going to be a really nice burst of flavor. The stems are fully edible, but they just add a little bit of a stringy texture that
Mm.
some people don't really like. But the flowers are good.
Okay, great. And I'm actually curious because you were kind of alluding to that, like garlic mustard is a biennial. Do you notice any difference between like first year garlic mustard and second year garlic mustard and how they taste, or are they similarly as garlicky?
They're similarly as garlicky. You can
Okay.
definitely tell the ones that they're a little old. Um,
Okay.
but even the ones that have when you think of garlic mustard, they have really glossy, fleshy leaves.
Mhm.
Um, and some of the older ones will start to get a little more papery. When you put them with oil and the nuts to make a paste, you don't ever notice texture wise, and the amount of garlic mustard that you're using, it kind of gets overwhelmed as well. But no, they just really taste like garlic. They're very powerful.
Yeah, it's delicious. I have
Yeah,
actually eaten
cool.
garlic mustard pesto before. It's it's great.
Yeah, I know that there's a couple of nature centers, at least in Bucks County. I'm still trying to get used to this area, but I know that they would do in the spring invasive species removal work days,
Hmm.
where then at the end we have all this garlic mustard that we've pulled out and they can't put it in their compost piles. So then they'll have a pesto making experience at the end for people. So I would
Nice.
definitely encourage people, wherever you are, look into your local nature centers or green space areas that might have work days and see if you can get involved in something like that because it's so good.
Yeah. And this is a good time of year to get out there and look for it.
Yes.
So this next question says, we know that mushrooms can be dangerous or fatal to eat. Do we
Yeah.
need to be cautious about of any plants in the same way?
The short answer is yes, of course. There are going to be things. For example, we have our deadly nightshades in this area. Um, they look like little cute tomatoes. They're adorable. They're wonderful. I put them in flower arrangements because it's fun. You don't want to eat those. While they can be great, every poison can be used as a medicine. It's the sort of thing that you only want to use if you are a trained herbalist or a trained chemist. It can actually help with eye issues, but it's the sort of thing that you nobody just going out to forage for a good time should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
However, they're not going to be in any foraging field guide due to the level of toxicity when prepared incorrectly. So if you're utilizing a field guide and you're coming across plants that aren't in the field guide and you're still uncertain, don't try, don't play with fire. Um, but you're absolutely correct. The mushrooms, when I teach these sorts of classes, I definitely tell people like mushrooms are the sort of thing that if you get it wrong, you could risk your life. For the most part, with berries or leaves, or flowers, if you get it wrong, you're going to have a tummy ache and your body is going to evacuate whatever you ate and you're not going to feel good, but your body's going to let you learn the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of take that as, I don't want to say permission to make mistakes, but permission to not feel as scared and to feel
Mm-hmm.
a little more empowered. But you definitely still want to respect things like pokeweed are going to be growing soon. And the young leaves of pokeweed were a traditional soul food, poke salad. And over time, that evolved into the collard greens that we think of as being the steamed or the boiled collard greens is a huge, huge part of soul food. Originally, that was poke salad, which are these leaves. However, as that plant grows and produces berries, these beautiful, like purple and fuchsia berries, that is extremely toxic and can cause a lot of vomiting. A lot of agricultural people are aware of the fact that if you have goats, you cannot have pokeweed anywhere near that because the goats will eat it and then the goats will die just because they become so dehydrated from vomiting, and it's a mess. But the leaves are still really great. So it definitely is the sort of thing of, if you are unfamiliar with the plants in your area, I really recommend getting foraging field guides, because these guides will be able to tell you and help you navigate what part of the plant might be good, what part of the plant might be toxic, or should you avoid this plant overall.
Mm.
I hope that helps clear.
Yeah. So speaking of those field guides and those handbooks, someone actually has a question about what
Yeah,
is this one particularly is what is the best guide for native edible plants, but a lot of
gotcha.
what you're talking about also is invasive. So do you have favorite foraging guides, handbooks that you could share?
So my personal guide, I don't know if you can see it on this screen. This is, you can't. It
Right,
is
with the
a
blurred
concise
background.
guide in color of herbs, of wild herbs. This was actually printed in Czechoslovakia and then has been translated. This is also from 1973. This is a hand-me-down sort of thing. Um, but I absolutely love it. So a concise guide to color, a concise guide in color of herbs is the title of it. So that's what I use at this point. It's less of a field guide and more of a list of each
Okay.
page is its own entry. And it will describe the plant in full, but there's no dichotomous key. There's no help to identifying.
Mhm.
You just kind of have to know this is this, and now I'm going to read about it. I also have the Encyclopedia of Herbal Medicine. So it's going to be a lot more of the medicinal plants and utilizing them for your health and well-being rather than for flavor and fun. But I will also say that everybody loves field guides. All the publishers love field guides. There's Audubon, Peterson, Sibley, and while many of them are your wildlife or trees, there's a whole bunch of different foraging field guides out there. And I can't honestly say which one is better just because they're all organized in a different way. Some are more for the visual learners, where
Mhm.
each page is its own picture and maybe two entries, but they're all very much in color and organized by color. Whereas a lot of Audubon field guides are, all of the images are in the front and then there's a page number associated with it. And then you flip to the back of the book and it's just all text.
Mm.
That's a little harder for me personally to use, but there's a lot of people who that makes more sense in their brains. I also have a Newcombs field guide, which
I
is
was just
more
about to say Newcombs is one for native plants that I would suggest. Yeah.
yes, which I love. I personally love my Newcombs field guide, but it is not one that I
Yeah.
would ever recommend to a beginner because it is
Sure.
organized botanically. So you
Yeah.
need to know plant parts and structures. Um, but if you are familiar with botany, then I love anything new combs.
Hmm.
Is
Hmm.
always my favorite. Um, but
Great.
I think the best way is to, if you go and Google uh, field guide, you're looking for, I believe, native plant field guides of, I would say, because you're so niche at that point, just look for Eastern United States rather than of Pennsylvania, because you're already getting so narrow focus there. Google the field guides, and then you should be able to, if you click on them, take a look inside the book, and you might see like the first few pages or a few excerpts of how it's organized. Go
Hmm.
through the various ones and see which organization method strikes you to be the most congruent with how you learn. Because again, everything's organized a little differently.
Yeah, those are great tips for sure. And after the presentation, I will put together a resources list on
Oh,
the webpage for the presentation. So I'll try to put some links to a bit of what we've talked about as well. So
yeah, that would be great.
yeah,
Cool.
okay, great. There's a question about mugwort. They have mugwort growing all over their yard and know it's invasive, but also
Yes,
medicinal. Is there any
yes.
way for them to use mugwort?
Okay, so I'm gonna spout my. Ooh, okay, I have two favorites because I can't choose just one. I love mugwort. Um, some people really hate it. If you rub the leaves, that's one of the really great ways to identify it. If you're confused if it's ragweed or mugwort, and some people really hate the smell. They think it smells like turpentine. I think it
Mm.
doesn't, but everybody smells things a little different. I really like to use it either to make a mugwort bee balm bitters mix. So I'll add the scarlet bee balm bracts and flower heads, a little bit of mugwort, a little bit of blood orange if you have it, but you can settle for normal orange if you don't, to a vodka solution and muddle that all up, mix it up, and now you've created a really, really nice bitters mix. And for those that do not know, bitters, when you see that in cocktail ingredients, that stimulates the digestive system. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of these cocktails are pre-dinner drinks. So we drink our bitters ahead of time. It stimulates the liver and the gallbladder to start producing bile. It stimulates the stomach to start getting its rear end gear to get your digestive system running effectively and efficiently so we can reduce feelings of bloating or cramping after a meal. So bitters are great for that. And that mugwort, bee balm, and blood orange really just taste so good together. So I love
Mm.
that. But I also love mugwort focaccia bread. So as you're making
Mm.
your focaccia, a lot of people, it's really trendy to make like the nice artwork on the top. So the mugwort leaves look really pretty, but you can also just rip it up and add it in with your dry ingredients. Anytime you're making like biscuits, um, like we really like they're like the knockoff Red Lobster cheddar biscuits. I really like those, but we'll also throw in a whole
Mm.
bunch of weird plants like mugwort when it calls for like the flour and all of the dry ingredients. So focaccia is definitely probably up there with the number one way that I like to use
That's awesome. Because yeah,
it.
once you get mugwort, you have mugwort
Yes,
for a
yes,
while.
it's hard. It's hard to, that's one that if you're going to be
Oh,
digging and you can't just like rip the leaves off and think it's going to go away. That's going to take too long to reduce the energy level of the plant. You have to dig that
yeah,
out and
yeah,
really, really dig it out for a long time.
yeah. It's a beast. So our last question potentially is what's the best time of year to forage for dandelion root?
Oh, that's a great question. I just made dandelion latte. I love it. And that is, I typically say, depending on the freezing level that year, October, late October, like Halloween to November, just because we're going to be digging the plant up to get the roots, and you don't want permafrost. You don't want to be sitting there stabbing the ground with your trowel because the ground is frozen. Um, but you do want to wait as late into the fall as you kind of can, just because as the plant says, okay, our flowering season is done, we're going to go dormant, it pulls all of those nutrients back into the roots to store for future years. So if you're going to really, again, get the most bang for your buck, that once you want to wait as late in the fall as you possibly can, while keeping in mind, oh, maybe this year's really, really mild and you can wait until, like, a few years ago it was 60 degrees in Christmas. So some years you can wait a little longer, but keep an eye on the weather for that time of year.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
So one question, see, I said it was maybe our last question. One popped in, which is great because I actually wanted to ask you about this. In the introduction that I gave, it says that you had created a cookbook. Was that correct?
Yeah.
Trails to
Yeah.
Tasting. Is that something that's available for folks to access or purchase?
Yes, if you're sending links out
Yes.
to people, I will definitely include it. Right now, it is right now it's actually on sale. I did a spring foraging sale, so it is discounted right now. But if you wait to get it until May, it will be $20. But right now, it's a little bit cheaper. But
Okay.
the whole premise of that book was something I did during a program I did during COVID, of this video program where I would take people virtually on a walk throughout the trails. We would identify a plant each week. I would talk about that plant's importance in the ecosystem or its negative impacts in the ecosystem, how to harvest it, and then we would make a cocktail out of it. And if people
Hmm.
didn't want the alcoholic parts of it, then have the non-alcoholic modifications. And so, because COVID lasted for a long time, I collected a huge amount of these recipes and ideas. So I compiled it into a book. And the first portion of it, it has um, plant anatomy diagrams. It has foraging etiquette and ethics. So it's designed to be the sort of thing that you can put in your field bag to take out with you and hold up and
Mhm.
say, oh, I'm going to be making the cedar whiskey sour. I want to be able to identify what the Eastern red cedar looks like.
Mhm.
You can hold it up, but then you can also take it and put it on your counter as you're making it and follow the recipe. So if those of you
That's
are
awesome.
interested, I would
Yes,
love to get
please
that out there.
do.
Yeah.
Please do share that, and I will include that. So segue into this person's question, which is, do you have other books other than your own, that you would recommend for cooking foraged foods?
Ooh, let me find that. I apologize. I'm very bad at titles just because I'm like, oh, it's the one with this picture on it. So let me get the
Right.
title for you, by Marie Vaujoin, who is, if you know her on Instagram, she was the six foot terrace, 6 foot garden. She lived in New York. Oh, but I love her book. She's a forager. Um, it's 66 square feet is her Instagram, where she talks about foraging.
Hmm.
Um, but it is something about feast. Forage, Harvest, Feast is the book that I love of hers. And she goes through way more than just drinks. She'll talk a lot about, like, fermentation. She does a
Hmm.
magnolia fermented drink, but she also will
Nice.
talk about the herbs that she uses with roast duck and all sorts of
Hmm.
different. It truly is a foraged feast. So
Yeah, nice.
send that.
Can you say her name one more time?
Marie Villejoen. I hope I'm
Okay.
pronouncing it right. She's from South Africa.
Okay.
So it's I believe, a French name or Dutch,
Yeah,
but either way, I can definitely send that along as well. I love all of what she does. And if you can follow her
great.
on Instagram, she posts a lot of educational content there too.
Wonderful. Um, Awesome. And just to, I guess, recap what you mentioned back in the beginning is that we are going to get you to come to Jenkins in person
Yes.
on June 1st, and we're very excited to have that. So I will also include that information in our resources page about the in-person class that you'll be teaching for us, and hopefully some of you will be able to come and join us.
Yes,
So,
I love that.
well, Marissa, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. We really appreciate it. A nice,
Thank-
timely topic as spring is, I think, really here now.
Yes.
So people can get out and about and start working on their plant ID. And thank you, and I'll see you again in June for our in-person class.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining.